Marilyn Monroe was trapped inside a diamond cage, her limousine, until a glimpse of pure, devastating human sorrow on a rainy New York street shattered the illusion. Against the desperate protests of her handlers, the world's most famous woman slammed the brakes on her life, making an impulsive decision to step out of the car that no one saw coming. The light rain outside Manhattan's famous Plaza Hotel caught the streetlights, turning the thick glass of the limousine window into a canvas of blurry electric gold. Inside the car, pressed deep into the cool leather, sat Marilyn. She was completely, profoundly alone, despite the diamonds, the silk, and the perfume that cost more than most people earned in a month. This was the gilded cage of celebrity, the price paid for a dream that had somehow turned into a beautiful, claustrophobic nightmare. The weight of the world's desire rested on her slender shoulders, and it felt heavier than any stone she wore, heavier than the burden of expectation she carried from every fan. Tonight, Marilyn was desperate for escape, longing for a moment when the performance could stop. As the immense black car navigated the wet, cavernous streets, her handler, Edna, sat rigid and correct across from her, occasionally glancing at her watch, marking the passing of time and money, ensuring the star adhered to the minute-by-minute prison of her schedule. Marilyn's eyes, however, were fixed on something outside, a flash of movement near a closed diner entrance. It was a lone, small figure huddled against the entrance, completely exposed to the elements, her shoulders shaking violently beneath a thin, worn coat. This was not a celebrity sighting or a staged event. It was unscripted grief, raw and undeniable. Marilyn's entire existence, a machine that demanded she smile even when her soul was shattered, came to a sudden halt. The sight of that raw sorrow, a feeling more authentic than anything she had felt all year, pierced her. A powerful, forgotten instinct, the genuine human empathy of Norma Jean, rose up and eclipsed the practiced indifference of Marilyn Monroe. The thought was sharp and instantaneous. She needs help. My life can wait. The exhaustion of her own fame vanished, replaced by a fierce, driving urgency to connect with something genuine. The life she was running from suddenly seemed less urgent than the pain she was witnessing. Then a command, quiet but laced with absolute, undeniable authority, cut through the plush silence of the back seat. This wasn't the voice of the star. This was the voice of a soul demanding connection. "Frank," she commanded, her voice suddenly clear, "stop the car. Now." The driver, Frank, his foot already on the accelerator for the green light, instantly slammed on the brakes, sending a shudder through the immense vehicle. This is madness, Frank thought, his mind racing through the potential headlines, the security risks, the sheer impossibility of the command. But he knew that tone. The life of the world's biggest star had just been derailed by a crying woman and 3 imperative words. The single word, "stop," hung in the air of the limousine like a gunshot, freezing the world outside and the panic within. Edna, the handler, recoiled as if struck, her perfectly composed mask finally slipping. "Miss Monroe," Edna began, her voice a strained hiss, "you absolutely cannot. We have an 11 p.m. hard stop for security and the traffic laws alone. If the studio hears you stop the car, they will terminate your contract for violating the press clause. They will say you are unstable, irresponsible." Edna's panic only reinforced Marilyn's sudden resolve. She ignored the frantic handler completely. "Frank," Marilyn repeated, her voice steady, "pull over to the curb and kill the engine." Frank, who had seen enough of the real Norma Jean in his 3 years of service to recognize the tone of absolute sincerity, didn't hesitate. He gently guided the car to the edge of the street, the tires hissing softly on the wet asphalt. The moment the car halted, the silence became profound, and Marilyn was already moving. With a speed and decision that surprised even herself, she unlatched the door and stepped out into the humid, rain-slicked night. The roar of a passing bus, the sharp smell of pavement and exhaust fumes, the sudden, chilly dampness soaking instantly into her couture gown. It all assaulted her senses. The velvet soft air of the limo was replaced by the cold, damp truth of the street. For a moment she was fully exposed, shorn of the protective bubble that had defined her existence for a decade. Eleanor, the old woman, was huddled near the recessed doorway of a closed shop. Her sobs were quiet, ragged sounds of true heartbreak that cut through the city noise. Marilyn approached slowly, tentatively. Every step on the uneven pavement felt like a mile away from the smooth, predictable floor of the soundstage. When Eleanor finally lifted her head, she looked at the dazzling, soaking vision standing before her with only dull confusion. She didn't see Marilyn Monroe. She saw a kind, beautiful woman kneeling beside her. Marilyn gently lowered herself until she was on one knee on the wet pavement, bringing her face close to Eleanor's, establishing an immediate level connection. Her hair was instantly plastered to her temples, the expensive styling dissolving in the rain. "Ma'am," Marilyn whispered, her voice stripped of all its trademark breathiness. "Are you all right? Can I help you?" Edna, frozen in the limo doorway, watched in silent horror as the icon got soaked to the skin, asking the most earnest, humble question imaginable. It was a moment where Norma Jean completely overshadowed the powerful celebrity persona. The entire city seemed to pause, witnessing a moment of genuine vulnerability that no stage director could ever script, a collision between ultimate fame and ultimate obscurity. If you've ever felt compelled to abandon the rules and take a massive risk for a small, meaningful act of kindness, hit that subscribe button to join the community that believes in the human heart behind the legend. The rain on Marilyn's exposed shoulders was cold, but the connection she sought was instantly warm, a profound difference from the hot, artificial lights of the stage she had just left. As she knelt on the damp sidewalk, eye level with the weeping woman, the famous veil of celebrity that usually separated her from the world simply dissolved. She wasn't Marilyn Monroe anymore. She was a woman reaching out to another woman in pain. The old woman, Eleanor, finally managed a choked whisper. "You shouldn't be here, miss. You'll ruin your clothes. You'll catch a terrible cold out here." This genuine concern for a stranger's material welfare, born of a different time, only pulled Marilyn closer. She took Eleanor's hand, frail and cold as bone, between her own soft, warm ones. The coldness of Eleanor's fingers spoke volumes about how long she had been sitting in this solitary grief, nursing a sorrow too big for her frail frame in the relentless rain. "My clothes don't matter," Marilyn insisted, her voice resonating with an unfamiliar sincerity. "Only what matters in your heart matters right now. Please tell me what happened. Why are you crying?" Eleanor hesitated, glancing around nervously. A small crowd was indeed starting to gather, held back only by the immense black limousine acting as a temporary barrier. But in the quiet pool of rain and light where Marilyn and Eleanor knelt, the world was silent. "It's silly," Eleanor confessed, the tears slowing as the warmth of Marilyn's hands began to seep into her own. "It's just the memory, you see. It's the weight of missing him, the way a simple object can hold 50 years of a life lived, and then that object is gone. It's just... Today is the anniversary. My Arthur. Before he went off overseas, he gave me this tiny, simple thing. A little silver thimble. Said it was to remind me that even small things can hold great use. I've carried it every day for 50 years. Today, I was taking the bus home and I went to touch it in my coat pocket and it was gone. Just gone." Her voice broke again, a small sound of pure devastation. "It's like I lost the last physical piece of his heart I was allowed to keep. It's the final cord cut, and I can't bear it. It's too much. It's not worth anything, not really, but it was the last piece of him that was mine. It was my memory." Marilyn, who possessed jewelry worth millions, understood instantly. The loss of that simple thimble felt more tragic than losing the entire contents of a bank vault because its value was spiritual, not fiscal. She knew the pain of loving a man and losing him, and she knew that the things that truly hold value are those that cannot be insured. Eleanor wasn't crying over silver. She was crying over 50 years of devotion. A wave of profound sadness washed over Marilyn, mirroring the old woman's grief. Marilyn closed her eyes momentarily, taking in the full measure of this pure, unvarnished human sorrow, recognizing the stark difference between Eleanor's genuine, simple life and her own gilded complexities, a life where her losses were always public but never truly mourned. This loss was authentic. It was pure, unadulterated heartbreak that united them. For 50 years, Eleanor had carried that small silver thimble, a tiny, tarnished talisman of enduring love. Now, faced with its loss, she was broken, and Marilyn understood immediately that her heartbreak was not about the value of the silver, but about the immeasurable price of memory itself. Marilyn felt a searing kinship with this grief, envying Eleanor the beautiful certainty of the love she mourned. "Arthur gave it to me right before his ship sailed," Eleanor whispered, her memories turning vivid despite the pain. He said, "When you use this, remember that every stitch you sew is a thread connecting us." I touched it every single day, and now... Instinctively, Marilyn reached into the small beaded purse clutched in her other hand. Her fingers brushed against a tightly folded wad of bills. She thought briefly of how easy it would be to pay for 1,000 new silver thimbles, but knew the gesture would be meaningless, an insult to authentic love. Money was noise, a cheap fix. The solution in Hollywood was always money. Throw enough cash at the problem and the pain goes away. But as her fingers grasped the bills, Eleanor reacted instantly. "Oh, no, miss," the old woman said, pulling her hand gently away. Her rejection was not just polite, it was protective of her own dignity, a beautiful refusal to be bought. "I couldn't. I'm not asking for money. I just needed a minute to cry where no one knew me." The dignity in her refusal was absolute. She wasn't seeking charity, she was seeking empathy. Marilyn's hand froze inside her purse. This was the moment the star truly fell away, leaving only the woman. Eleanor had refused the great equalizer of fame, demanding instead something infinitely more valuable, connection. Then the intercom from the limo buzzed, sharp and urgent. "Miss Monroe, we have a camera crew turning onto the street in 90 seconds. We have to move, now." Frank's frantic warning raised the stakes immediately. Marilyn felt the pressure, not from the cameras, but from the urgency of their fleeting connection. She dropped the money and reached out once more, placing both hands on Eleanor's shoulders. Eleanor looked at Marilyn's wet face and saw past the sparkling exterior. "You look tired, dear," Eleanor murmured, her tone shifting. "You carry a heavy weight like my Arthur did before the war. All that sparkle can't hide it, dear. You look like you need comfort more than I need my trinket. You look like you carry a lot of sadness." It was a devastating reversal. Marilyn felt tears rising. The first person in months who had seen past the spectacle and acknowledged the aching heart within. She realized her mission wasn't to give charity, but to receive a gift far richer, a brief, honest moment of being seen. She looked at the lights of the approaching camera flash, feeling a powerful protective urge to shield Eleanor from the falseness of her own world. This shared moment in the rain was infinitely more real than any soundstage she had ever known. If you've ever found solace in a memory or felt seen by a stranger during a difficult time, drop a comment below and share that beautiful human moment with us. We love hearing how small acts of kindness change lives. The air was thick with the scent of ozone and wet pavement, yet in that small, damp pocket of the city, something luminous was happening. Eleanor had offered Marilyn a profound moment of grace, and now it was her turn to give, and the gift was something that truly came from the heart. Eleanor reached slowly into the deep, worn pocket of her thin winter coat, her movements deliberate. Her fingers fumbled momentarily before pulling out a small, dark object. It was a simple, slightly tarnished silver pendant shaped like a tiny looping knot. It looked utterly insignificant next to the enormous, sparkling diamonds on Marilyn's hand, yet Marilyn knew it held sacred weight. The difference in monetary value was comical. The difference in spiritual worth was staggering. The pendant was worn smooth by years of worry and love. "This belonged to my mother," Eleanor whispered, her voice steady now. "She gave it to me when I was just a girl. She said this knot is to remind you that even when the world tries to untangle you, love holds you fast." She looked deep into Marilyn's eyes, past the famous layers of paint and polish. "I was meant to lose that thimble today," Eleanor insisted, her voice soft but absolute, "so that I would still have this to give to you. I believe you need this more than I do right now, dear. You look like a girl who is being pulled apart by the threads, and you need something to hold you together. I want you to have it." Her conviction was stunning. She truly believed she was fulfilling a higher purpose by parting with her heirloom, fulfilling a destiny only she could see. The sincerity in her words was startling, a beautiful, necessary inheritance. Marilyn hesitated. The spiritual weight of the object felt too much to accept. This was not a token. This was Eleanor's final piece of emotional armor, passed on only because the need was seen as greater, a mantle of quiet strength. "I can't take this," Marilyn protested gently. "It's too much. It's too important." Eleanor insisted. She placed the cool, smooth metal of the pendant directly into Marilyn's shaking hand. The contrast was immediate, the rough, simple craftsmanship against Marilyn's delicate, pampered skin. As Marilyn's fingers closed around the simple piece of silver, she felt a profound transfer of energy, a quiet, non-negotiable benediction. She had not only been seen, but she had been given a tangible symbol of hope from a soul that had survived to one struggling to continue. Marilyn stood, slowly rising from the rain-soaked pavement, the little silver knot pendant clutched tightly in her fist. The crowd was growing, and the imminent arrival of the press was a looming threat, but Marilyn no longer heard them. This was the moment of their farewell, the unspoken benediction that would tie their two vastly different lives together forever. Eleanor reached out, not to touch the jewelry, but to gently cup Marilyn's wet cheek with her aged, wrinkled hand. It was a purely maternal gesture, tender and profound, delivered without expectation or recognition of fame. "Thank you, dear," Eleanor whispered, "not for stopping, but for seeing me." Then she leaned in close, her simple, weathered face just inches from the face that launched 1,000 magazine covers, and she gave her powerful, single piece of counsel. "Just promise me this, sweet girl. Don't let them change your heart." That simple, heartfelt charge landed with the weight of 1,000 sermons. Marilyn didn't cry. Instead, she bent down and pulled Eleanor into a full, genuine embrace, an awkward, wet, desperate hug on a cold New York street. She held on to the old woman tightly, drawing sustenance from Eleanor's simple, enduring resilience, realizing she had come to give comfort but had received salvation and the strength to face her own world. When she finally drew back, her eyes were shining with the fierce light of resolution. "I will not let them change my heart," she vowed internally, her mind suddenly crystal clear, a fierce promise made only to herself and this stranger. "I must protect this truth," she thought. She smoothed Eleanor's collar, gave her a final nod of powerful understanding, and turned back toward the waiting limousine. The handlers rushed forward, their voices loud and sharp. "Miss Monroe, you're soaked! Get in! You have to move!" Edna's face, however, was a mask of cold fury. Her eyes narrowed at the quiet power she saw radiating from Marilyn. She saw the star return changed, cloaked not in fur, but in an impossible, quiet dignity, the kind of inner strength no publicity stunt could manufacture. As the limousine's doors shut and the engine softly began to pull away, Marilyn looked out the back window. Eleanor stood perfectly still on the sidewalk, no longer crying, but smiling, a gentle, victorious smile. If you believe in the power of unseen acts of kindness and the quiet dignity of finding hope in unexpected places, please share this story with someone who needs to be reminded that the sun always follows the rain. The moment the limousine pulled away from the curb, rejoining the indifferent flow of Manhattan traffic, the atmosphere inside the car became charged not with the usual glamour, but with a palpable, unsettling silence. Marilyn was soaked, her makeup running slightly, yet she ignored the chaos she'd caused. Her entire focus was on the small, simple object pressed into the center of her palm, a simple piece of silver. Edna, the handler, was sputtering, desperate to regain control of the evening's narrative. "Miss Monroe, that was outrageous! The risks! The studio is going to hear about this immediately." Marilyn lifted her head, and the cold, powerful look in her eyes stopped Edna mid-sentence. "She was not a derelict, Edna," Marilyn said, her voice low and steady. "She was a woman who needed kindness, and she gave me something far more valuable than anything I own." With that, Marilyn dismissed the issue, turning her attention fully to the pendant. Under the soft, diffused interior light of the limo, she examined the little knot of silver. It was tarnished, yes, and the silver itself was clearly inexpensive, the kind of metal that turned dark and developed a beautiful, deep patina over time. It was the antithesis of the flawless, bright platinum and flawless diamonds that were her professional uniform. It was imperfect, flawed, and therefore deeply human. Yet, as she traced the looping, intricate knot with her thumb, it felt solid, real, and heavy with history. It was proof of a simple life lived with profound love. Every tiny scratch on the surface of the pendant was a story, every dull spot an echo of a moment of comfort. Marilyn realized that Eleanor hadn't given her a piece of metal. She had given her a physical anchor to reality. This small, cool piece of metal was infinitely more grounding than the millions in jewelry locked in her safe. It was the antithesis of the empty promises that Hollywood sold her every day, a tangible counterweight to the unreality of fame. It was a permanent reminder that authenticity existed outside the studio gates. She could, in fact, be a woman with messy hair and wet clothes, touched by genuine human emotion. She slowly pulled the simple frayed ribbon it hung from and slipped it carefully into the delicate, lacy lining of her brassiere, placing it directly over her heart. This was a sacred location, a spot reserved for the truth, shielded from the endless scrutiny of the world, guarding the heart that Eleanor told her not to change. It was a location that ensured it would always be close, yet permanently unseen by the grasping public eye. As the car turned onto the long, final stretch toward her temporary New York residence, Marilyn felt a shift. A profound sense of quietude settled over her soul. She had found a piece of true worth in the rain, a piece of worth that eclipsed every fame-driven accolade of her entire career. The evening's drama had cleansed her soul, leaving behind the pure, simple joy of human connection and a new, powerful resolve. She knew she would never take the pendant off. It was a secret kept between two women, one famous and one forgotten, bound together by a simple moment of pure, shared sorrow. But as she gently adjusted the pendant beneath the silk, her fingers felt a slight ridge on the back of the knot. It was a tiny, almost invisible latch, something she hadn't noticed in the frantic exchange on the sidewalk. She pulled at it softly. The little silver knot wasn't just a pendant, it was a locket. And the true gift, the most powerful secret, was still waiting inside. Curiosity, the same quiet, tenacious curiosity that drove Norma Jean and often clashed with the polished facade of Marilyn Monroe, now compelled her. Safely sequestered in her suite high above the noise of Manhattan, she carefully unclipped the silver pendant from the hidden spot near her heart and held it beneath the warm glow of a bedside lamp. The tiny, nearly invisible seam running along its side suggested it held an even deeper, more powerful secret. With fingers still slightly shaking, Marilyn worked the minuscule latch. It gave way with a faint, soft click, like a tiny door opening into the past. The knot-shaped pendant swung open to reveal a cavity no larger than a pinky fingernail. Inside, nestled against the dark patina of aged silver, was a minuscule piece of paper, folded and faded until it was the color of old ivory. Marilyn's breath hitched. A gasp escaped her throat, sharp and instantaneous. The timing was so devastatingly perfect, it felt like fate had guided Eleanor's hand, a sign of cosmic design. Very gently, she unfolded the paper, its edges crackling softly with age. She had to lean close to make out the faded script. The message was not a name or a date or a practical instruction. It was a single, profound sentence, a personal affirmation written by one of Eleanor's lost loved ones, now meant for Marilyn. Remember, the sun always follows the rain. Marilyn stared at the 7 simple, faded words. Just hours earlier, she had been drowning in the darkness of her own unhappiness and isolation, convinced her life was an endless storm, a permanent state of public sadness. And here, given by a stranger who saw her need, was a message of perfect, crystalline hope. It wasn't a coincidence. It was a direct, targeted answer to the specific emotional questions of worth and sorrow she had been struggling with for weeks. A quiet, powerful counterpoint to all the chaos, a tiny handwritten prophecy. She realized the incredible magnitude of Eleanor's sacrifice. She had given away her own last piece of inherited comfort to save a stranger's soul, a sacrifice greater than any jewel because Eleanor understood the true cost of being lost. The sincerity and purity of the note, unlike the millions of words written about her, was meant only for her soul. Marilyn refolded the paper with utmost care and placed it back inside the locket, snapping the clasp shut. The silver knot, now holding its magnificent, tiny secret, felt infinitely heavier. She hadn't just met a weeping woman in the rain. She had participated in a sacred, necessary exchange, receiving a profound, anonymous instruction to wait for the light. The silver knot lay cool against Marilyn's skin, a tiny, powerful gravity well pulling her away from the frantic orbit of Hollywood. The note within was a promise, a beacon from a life lived with quiet perseverance. For the first time since achieving stardom, Marilyn felt equipped to face the inevitable darkness, because now she knew exactly where the light was hiding. This simple piece of metal became her private, invisible shield, her lesson of hope. She slipped it onto a thin private chain, tucking it inside her clothing every morning. No matter how dazzling the gown or how brilliant the spotlight, the silver knot was resting just above her heart, a permanent, unspoken reminder of the woman in the rain. The change in Marilyn was subtle but profound, most noticeable not in her performance but in her pauses. She started to be fully present, no longer just performing the role of Marilyn Monroe, but living the role of Norma Jean with quiet dignity, listening to her own voice for the first time in years. A few weeks later, on a demanding movie set where tensions were running exceptionally high, Marilyn found herself facing a day of seemingly impossible emotional scenes. The crew was exhausted. She knew the most tired person was the night watchman, an older man named Sal who worked double shifts to pay for his granddaughter's tuition. Instead of retreating, Marilyn made a quiet call to her personal assistant. She did this not for public relations, but for the profound secretive joy of knowing she was using her fame to mitigate the genuine sorrow she had glimpsed on the street. The next morning, Sal arrived to find his car fully serviced, and the remaining balance of his granddaughter's tuition paid in full, deposited anonymously, marked only with the word hope. The sheer shock and relief on Sal's worn face, a face now mirroring Eleanor's, was the only payment Marilyn needed. She felt a profound, satisfying sense of purpose, a feeling far deeper than any standing ovation had ever provided, a sense that her wealth could finally do real meaningful work. The actress had not engaged in a grand public gesture. She had channeled the lesson of Eleanor, targeting an unseen sorrow with an unseen kindness. The simple encounter taught her more about connection than the years of psychoanalysis. Success, she understood, wasn't about how many people adored the image, but about being present for the people who needed the woman. True achievement lay in the private act. She began paying quiet, specific attention to the struggling souls in her life, using her immense fame not for gain, but as a source of silent, unexpected warmth. She found a beautiful new rhythm, balancing the chaos of the studio with the quiet charity of her true self, protecting her precious heart as Eleanor had instructed, allowing Norma Jean to finally breathe. The item had become her private anchor, rooting the dizzying fame of Marilyn Monroe to the enduring human perspective of Norma Jean. She had found a piece of true worth in the rain, a piece of worth that eclipsed every fame-driven accolade of her entire career. The world knows the legend of Marilyn Monroe, the iconic photographs, the devastating beauty that burned too bright, but the deeper, more profound truth, the legacy of Norma Jean, was kept carefully hidden, resting just above her heart for the remainder of her life, a simple, tarnished silver knot containing 7 faded words of hope. The most famous woman on earth used a piece of humble costume jewelry given by a stranger in the rain as her moral compass. This was the quiet, sacred contract born on that wet New York street. The silver knot became Marilyn's talisman of truth. It was worn during the most pivotal and chaotic moments of her life, a constant physical reminder that true wealth is not measured in carats but in connection. She channeled her profound wealth and influence into quiet acts of generosity, always anonymous, always directed toward the Eleanors of the world. She understood that her fame was a vast megaphone, but her greatest impact could be made in a whisper. She funded a small women's shelter in downtown Los Angeles, insisting that her name never be attached, simply because Eleanor had taught her the dignity of unseen help. The locket was there, close to her heart, until the very end. Decades later, when the world was sifting through the remains of the legend, curators and appraisers discovered the famous diamond rings and the magnificent gowns. But there, tucked away in a small velvet pouch, separate from all the insured photographed items, was the tarnished, simple silver knot. It was a complete anomaly, its true value invisible to everyone but the soul who carried it. The final, poignant message of the silver knot was this. It was proof that her core self, Norma Jean, was seen and validated before the beautiful, tragic final curtain fell. A humble woman in the rain had recognized her authentic, fragile humanity and offered her a powerful, unconditional gift of hope. That moment of shared vulnerability on a cold street corner eclipsed all the adulation of millions. The world gave her diamonds, but a stranger gave her the map back to her soul. That simple silver knot was the only treasure Marilyn Monroe truly needed to keep, a perpetual promise of sunshine after the storm. If this beautiful human story touched your heart, don't keep this secret to yourself. Like this video, subscribe for more untold Hollywood moments, and let us know what you thought in the comments below.